up to the book signing? Who remembers? Did Wallace show up? Emmeline, I see. Are you doing a thumbs down? Yeah, so Wallace didn't show up. Remember the bookstore owner? He was like, okay, guys, we're going to give him a few more minutes. 5 more minutes passed. He's like, okay, guys, we're going to give him a few more minutes. 5 more minutes passed, and kids started getting angry. What's up, Tony? Oh, nothing? Okay. So let me just remember at the end of chapter 2. Dink thought about that letter that Wallace wrote him. The letter that said, short of being kidnapped, I would not miss it. That's what Wallace said. So now Dink thinks that he's been kidnapped. So let's go ahead, remove my junk. We're going to go ahead and listen. I will share my screen. Let's see if this works. Can you guys still see me? Can you see me on that little screen? Perfect. Okay. All right. Ooh, very zoomed in today. All right, let's go ahead and read. Kidnapped, Ruth shrieked. Her blue eyes were huge. Josh and Dink covered their ears. Shh, said Josh. He handed the letter back to Dink and gave some gesture with his hand. Some strange woman is watching us. Over here. Dink had noticed the woman earlier. She'd been sitting in the back of the book nook. She's coming over here, Ruth Rose said. The woman had her brown hair in a neat bun. Half glasses perched on her. See, she has her glasses perched on her nose. She was wearing a brown dress and brown shoes and carried a book bag with a picture of a moose on the side. Around her neck, she wore a red scarf covered in tiny black letters. Excuse me, she said in a soft, trembling voice. Did you say that Wallace has been kidnapped? The woman poked her glasses nervously. Dink wasn't sure what to say. He thought Wallace had been kidnapped, but he couldn't be sure. Finally, he said, well, he might have been. My goodness, gasped the woman. Who are you? Josh asked her. Oh, pardon me, the woman blushed. My name is Mavis Green, she mumbled. I'm a writer, and I came to meet Mr. Wallace. Dink said, I'm Dink Duncan. These are my friends, Ruth Rose and Josh. Mavis shook hands shyly. Then she reached into her book bag and pulled out a folder of paper. Wallace wrote me this last week. He said something very particular in a letter, which we would call that a clue. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when he didn't show up today, and then I heard you mention kidnapping, Ruth handed the letter to Dink. So this is a letter that Wallace wrote to Mavis, the woman. Let me read it. Dear Mavis, thank you for your note. I'm well, and thank you for asking. But lately my imagination has been playing tricks on me. Maybe that's what happens to mystery writers. I keep thinking I'm being followed. We start seeing bad guys in the shadows. At any rate, I'm eager to meet you in Green Lawn. I look forward to our lunch after the signing. Wallace. So he said that he thinks someone has been following him. So that's a clue. That is a clue. Wow, said Ruth Rose. First he says he's being followed, and then he winds up missing? Dink told Mavis about his letter from Wallace. He said the only thing that would keep him from coming was if he was kidnapped. Oh dear, said Mavis. I just don't understand. Why would anyone want to kidnap Wallace? If he's the most famous mystery writer in the world, he must be rich, right? Josh said. Maybe someone kidnapped him for ransom. So ransom means for money. So if someone kidnaps someone, they'll usually be like, hey, if you give me $1 million, you can have this person back. So she's thinking maybe someone kidnapped him for money. Suddenly, Josh grabbed Dink and spun him around, pointing towards the street. Look, the cops are coming. They must have heard something about the kidnapping. A police officer was walking towards them. Josh, that's just Officer Fallon. Jimmy Fallon's grandfather, said Dink. Jimmy came to get a book signed. I saw him inside the book nook. Maybe we should show Officer O'Fallon these letters, Ruth Rose suggested. They could be clues if Wallace Wallace has really been kidnapped. Who's been kidnapped? Asked Officer Fallon, who was now standing near them. Not my grandson, I hope, he added a grin. Dink showed Officer Fallon the 2 letters. We think Wallace Wallace might have been kidnapped, he said. He promised he'd come sign books, but he isn't here. Officer Fallon read Mavis's letter first, then Dink's. He scratched his head, his chin, and handed the letters back. The letters sound a bit superstitious, he said, but it's more likely that Mr. Wallace just missed his flight. Jimmy Fallon ran out of the book nook, waving a Wallace Wallace book at his grandfather. Grandpa, he never came. Can we go for ice cream anyway? Officer Fallon put a big hand on Jimmy's head. In a minute, son. To Dink, he said, I wouldn't worry. Mr. Wallace will turn up. Call me tomorrow if there's no news, okay? Then they watched Jimmy and his grandfather walk away. Dink handed Mavis's letter back to her. He folded his and slid it into his pocket. Crazy thoughts were bouncing around in his head. What if Wallace Wallace has really been kidnapped? It happened because I invited him to Greenlawn. I'm practically an accomplice. So an accomplice is someone who helps commit a crime. I don't want to wait till tomorrow, he said. I say we start looking for Wallace Wallace now. Where do we start? Ruth Rose asked. Dink jerked his thumb over his shoulder. Right here at the book nook. Excuse me, Mavis Green said shyly. May I come along too? Sure, Dink said. He marched back inside the book nook with the others following. Mr. Paskey was putting the Wallace Wallace books back on the shelf. He looked even more nervous than before. Excuse me, Mr. Paskey, Dink said. Have you heard from Wallace Wallace? Mr. Paskey's hand shot up to his bow tie. No, Dink, not a word. We think he's been kidnapped, Josh said. Mr. Paskey swallowed, making his bow tie wiggle. Now, Joshua, let's not jump to conclusions. I'm sure there's a rational explanation for his absence. Dink told Mr. Paskey about the 2 letters. I'm really worried, Mr. Paskey. Where could he be? Mr. Paskey took out a handkerchief and wiped his face. I have no idea. He removed a paper from his desk and handed it to Dink. All I have is his itinerary, which is like a schedule. The others looked over his shoulder as he's read. All right, so this is his schedule. Itinerary for Wallace Wallace. 1. Arrive at Bradley Airport at 7 p.m. Friday, July 15th. New England Airlines Flight 3132. 2. Meet taxi driver from Lawrence Taxi Service. 3. Drive to Shangri-La Hotel. 4. Book signs at Book Nook at 11 a.m. Saturday, July 16th. 5. Lunch, then back to airport for 4:30 flight. Can I keep this? Dink asked, so this could be a clue. Mr. Paskey blinked. Well, I guess that'll be all right, but why do you need the itinerary? Dink picked up marker and drew circles around the words airport, taxi, hotel, Book Nook. This is like a trail. It leads from the airport last night to the Book Nook today, said Dink. Somewhere along this trail, Wallace Wallace disappeared. Dink stared at the itinerary, and we're going to find him. All right, we're going to do one more chapter, okay? Mr. Paskey shooed them out of the Book Nook and locked the front door. Oh, sorry, guys. I have to eat lunch, he said, and scurried down Main Street. Come on, Dink said. There's a phone in Ellie's diner. Good, we can eat while you're calling. Josh stopped. Who are you calling? The airport, Dink said, to see if Wallace Wallace was on that 7 o'clock flight last night. They walked into Ellie's diner. Just as Jimmy Fallon and his grandfather came out, Jimmy was working on a triple-decker chocolate cone. Ellie stood behind the counter as usual. Her apron was smeared with ketchup, mustard, chocolate, and a lot of stuff Dink didn't recognize. Ellie smiled. Hi, Dink. Butter crunch, right? Dink shook his head. No thanks, Ellie. I came to use the phone. Excuse me, but would it be all right if I bought you each a cone? Mavis said. Mavis Green asked. I was going to buy lunch for Mr. Wallace anyways. Gee, thanks, Josh said. I'll have a scoop of mint chip and a scoop of pistachio. Ooh, that sounds delicious. Ooh, you like green ice cream too? Mavis said. She smiled shyly. I'll have the same, please. I like pink ice cream, Ruth Rose said. Can you guys see this? I'll have one strawberry cone, please. One scoop. How about you, Dink? Mavis asked. I'm not hungry. Thanks, he said. But you guys go ahead. I'm going to call the airport. Dink felt guilty. If he hadn't invited Wallace Wallace to Greenlawn, his favorite author would be safe at home in his castle in Maine. But Dink couldn't help feeling excited, too. He felt like a detective from one of Wallace Wallace's books. Dink stepped into the phone booth, looked up the number for the New England Airlines, and called. When a voice came over, he asked if Wallace Wallace had been aboard Flight 3132 last night. He was? Did it land at 7 o'clock? Dink asked. Thanks a lot. He rushed out of the phone booth. Hey guys, they told me Wallace Wallace was on the plane and it landed on time. So he didn't miss his flight, Ruth Rose said through the pink strawberry lips. That's right. Dink pulled out the itinerary. He drew a line through the airport. So he's crossing off his clues. This is so exciting, Ruth Rose said. Now what? Josh asked, working on his double dipper. Dink pointed to the next circle on the itinerary. Now we need to find out what taxi picked him up. Lauren's taxi is over by the river, Ruth Rose said. Dink looked at Mavis. Would you like to come with us? We can walk there in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Mavis Green wiped her lips carefully with a napkin. I'd love to come, she said in her soft voice. They left Ellie's diner, walked left on the bridge lane, then headed down the Wood River Road towards the river. Mr. Paskey looked pretty upset, didn't he? Josh said, crunching the last of his cone. His chin was green. Wouldn't you be upset too if you had a bunch of customers at your store waiting to meet a famous author and he didn't show up? Ruth Rose asked. Yeah, but he was sweating buckets. I wonder if Mr. Paskey kidnapped Wallace Wallace. Remember yesterday we were talking about how sometimes guilty people act nervous, like how it was when I broke the window at my parents' house? Josh, get real. Why would Mr. Paskey kidnap an author? Ruth asked Rose. He sells tons of Wallace Wallace's books. I don't think Mr. Paskey is the kidnapper, Dink said. But in a way, Josh is right. Detectives should consider everyone as a suspect. Remember that word suspect, okay? Just the way they do in Wallace's Wallace books. At River Road, they turned left. 2 minutes later, Dink pushed open the door to the Lawrence Taxi Service office. He asked the man behind the counter if one of their drivers had met Flight 3132 at Bradley Airport the previous night. The man ran his fingers down a clipboard, said that would be Maureen Higgins. She's out back eating her lunch, he said, pointing over his shoulder. Walk straight through. They cut through the building to a grassy area in the back. Through the trees, Dink could see the Indian River. The sun reflected off the water like bright coins. A woman was sitting at a picnic table eating a sandwich and filling in a crossword puzzle. Excuse me, are you Maureen Higgins? Dink asked. A woman shook her head without looking up. Nope, I'm Marilyn Monroe. The woman wrote in another letter. She looked up. She had even the merriest blue eyes Dink had ever seen. Yeah, cutie pie, I'm Maureen. She pointed at her sandwich at Dink. And who might you be? I'm Dink Duncan, he said. These are my friends, Josh, Ruth Rose, and Mavis. We wondered if you can help us, said Ruth Rose. Here's Maureen. Take a good look at her. Maureen stared at them. How? Did you pick up a man named Wallace Wallace last night? Dink asked. Maureen squinted one of her blue eyes. Why do you want to know? Because he's missing, said Josh. Well, I sure ain't got him. Maureen took a bite of her sandwich and mayonnaise oozed out onto her fingers. I know, we didn't think you had him, Dink said, but did you pick him up? Maureen nodded, swallowing. Sure, I picked him up. 7 o'clock sharp. I was there with my sign saying Wallace. The guy spots me, trots over. I take him out to my taxi. He climbs in carrying a small suitcase, kinda spooky guy, dressed in a hat, a long raincoat, sunglasses. Sunglasses at night. Doesn't speak a word, just sits. Spooky. Did you take him to the Shangri-La Hotel? Yep. Those were my orders. God didn't have to give me directions, but it would have been nice if he said something. Pass the time, you know. Lot of people. They chat to act friendly. Not this one. Quiet as a mouse in the back seat. Maureen wiped mayonnaise from her fingers and lips. Who is this Wallace Wallace guy anyway? He's a famous writer, Ruth Rose said. Maureen's mouth fell open. You mean I had a celebrity in my cab and I didn't even know? What happened when you got to the hotel? Josh asked. Maureen stood up and tossed her napkin in the trash. I get out of my side, then I open his door. He hops out, hands me a 20. Last I seen, he's scooting into the lobby. What's up?
You're frozen.
Oh, I'm frozen?
Yeah, you're frozen.
Am I still frozen?
Yes.
No.
Is it okay?
No, mine is still frozen.
What?
All right. Can you still hear me though?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, well, let's just keep going. Okay, I'll go back a little bit.
Okay.
What happened when you got to the hotel? Maureen stood up and tossed her napkin into the trash. I got out of my side. I opened his door. He hops out, hands me a 20. Last I seen, he's scooting into the lobby. Dink pulled out the itinerary. He crossed out taxi with thick black line. Then he drew a question mark next to the hotel. So he's checked off the airport. We know Wallace Wallace isn't there. Checked off the taxi. We know he's not in the taxi still. So now we're left with the hotel. Thanks a lot, Miss Higgins, he said. Come on, guys. I have a feeling we're getting real close to finding Wallace Wallace. Maureen put her hand on Dink's arm. I just thought of something, she said. When he handed me my fare, this Wallace fellow was smiling. Dink stared at Maureen. Smiling? She nodded. Yep. He had a silly grin on his face, like he knew some big secret or something. What could that secret be? Think in your head, what could that secret be? Okay, so let's go ahead and